Luke Chambers could tell what kind of day it would be by the way the shop door rattled before sunrise. Not from traffic. Millhaven didn't have traffic anymore, not the kind that meant money moving. The old tire plant had shut down in phases, then all at once. The lumber mill ran half shifts when orders came through, and Main Street had gone from neon beer signs and bakery steam to plywood windows and 4 lease posters curling in the damp. No, the rattle came from wind pushing down the valley, the kind that hit the corrugated roof in low, angry pulses like someone leaning all their weight on it. Luke stood in the doorway of Chambers' cycle and machine with a coffee going cold in his hand, broad shoulders filling the frame. At 46, he looked older in bad light, younger on a bike. A burn scar climbed from the base of his collarbone, up the left side of his neck, and vanished under stubble near his jaw. The ink above his collar, marine black gone bluish with age, peeked out whenever he reached overhead for a wrench. His leather cut was cracked, oil dark, and patched so many times it looked like 3 different men had lived in it before him. Inside the 2-bay shop, the radio muttered weather alerts between static and classic rock. Outside, the county moved as if bracing. Gas station line longer than usual. Pickup beds stacked with generators. Moms buying shelf-stable groceries and flashlights. In Millhaven, people didn't panic loud. They prepared quiet, jaw tight, because they'd learned what happened when they waited for help that had to drive in from somewhere else. By 9, the first of the iron lanterns rolled in one by one, rain still hours out, but inevitable in the smell of the air. They were vets, mechanics, former miners, laid-off line workers, one ex-EMT with bad knees and better instincts. Their bikes weren't parade chrome. They were built to survive washed-out service roads and logging cuts, with high pipes, knobby tires, and enough straps and hard cases to turn a run for parts into a supply line. People in town still crossed themselves when a pack of them passed, old reflex from old stories. But those same people had opened doors at midnight in ice storms to find lanterns on their porches with insulin coolers, propane canisters, and sacks of dog food. Luke moved through his morning like always, fork seals on a mud bike, a stator issue on a county truck no one wanted to pay to fix, 2 phone calls from people asking if he could just take a look at things they couldn't afford to replace. He answered in short sentences, worked with deliberate hands, and listened to the volunteer emergency band playing softly through a dented speaker in his office. It was habit from deployments and disasters both. Listen while you work. Know what breaks first. Spring storm season had already torn up the county once this year. A week earlier, runoff had swallowed a culvert on Route 6 and left an entire trailer park cut off until dawn. Last month, a diabetic man in Cedar Hollow had waited 3 extra hours for an ambulance because GPS sent the crew to the paved road that ended at a locked timber gate. Emergency contracts had been rebid, delayed, rebid again. Budget hearings had come and gone with promises and no crews. Everyone knew where response times got long. Hill schools, trailers, quarry roads, anywhere zip codes thinned out. At 11:30, Luke signed off on an invoice and looked at the sky, turning the color of bruised steel over the ridge. He called the club's group line. "Storm shift," he said when they picked up. "Top off tanks. Keep comms on. If it goes sideways, we move." No one asked, move where. In Millhaven, that part usually announced itself. The weather did not arrive. It attacked. School let out under a hard, yellow light that made everything look wrong. Then the western horizon folded in on itself, and the first wall of rain hit with enough force to blur the cinder-block school into gray smears. Wind dropped branches across roads in minutes. Power lines whipped, sparked, snapped. Ditches that had been dust that morning ran brown and fast by 3:10. Luke was in the back bay with his forearms buried in a carburetor when the volunteer radio screamed to life in a tone he felt in his spine before he understood words. Unit 12, be advised. School bus rollover. County 9 near quarry access. Repeat. School bus rollover. He was already moving, wiping his hands on a rag, crossing the office in 3 strides. The dispatcher's voice was clipped and too fast. Driver trapped. Multiple juveniles on board. Roadway compromised. We need heavy extraction and water response. Another voice cut in. Likely patrol, breathless and fighting static. County 9 is blocked at mile marker 14. Trees down and shoulder collapse. I can't get apparatus through. I can't even turn around. Then the line everyone in Millhaven dreaded. Nearest, heavy unit ETA 40 minutes minimum. 2 bridge closures confirmed. 40 minutes in fair weather was long. In this, it might as well have been next week. Luke looked through the office window toward the road and saw panic spread in real time. Parents were already racing pickups and SUVs toward County 9, tires throwing rooster tails of mud. One minivan fish-tailed across both lanes and stalled halfway on the shoulder, forcing 2 others to stop behind it. A sheriff's cruiser tried to push through and got pinned by sheer volume. He keyed his mic. Dispatch. This is Chambers at Cycle and Machine. You got location ping? A beat. Chambers, this is restricted channel. Then unrestricted. I know the quarry trails. Silence, then another voice, older, tired, making a decision he'd have to defend later. Bus is down embankment, off 9 near Old East Access Gate. Standard approach impassable. Use caution. Repeat. Use caution. Luke was already dialing out before the transmission ended. Lanterns, mount up, he said when the first rider answered. Knobbies, tow straps, med kits if you got 'em. No chrome showboats. We're going in from service roads. How bad? Bad enough dispatch. Stop pretending they got this. He hung up and moved with the speed of long practice. Waterproof roll bag from the shelf. Trauma kit from under the desk. Bolt cutters. Spare gloves. 2 coils of braided strap. He slid into rain gear, shrugged into his cut over it, and stepped into weather that felt like standing under a fire hose. By the time he kicked his bike to life, 3 lanterns had arrived through side streets. Marisol with a dual sport and old EMT reflexes. Big Allen on an adventure rig with panniers full of tools. Deacon, who rarely spoke and always brought extra rope. Luke pointed, shouted over the storm. Quarry side. Stay staggered. If you dump, you get up or call it out. Don't disappear. They nodded and launched into rain thick enough to erase taillights at 30 yards. County 9 looked less like a road than a drainage channel by the time they reached the first choke point. Parents had packed both lanes, doors open, people screaming names into the wind as if volume could carry through steel and water. A father in a soaked hoodie pounded on Luke's shoulder when he idled past. My girl is on that bus. Please, please. Luke grabbed his forearm once hard. What's her name? Emily. 7th grade. Red backpack. Luke held his gaze for half a second that felt like a contract. We're going. A county deputy tried to wave them back toward the paved shoulder. You can't go through there. Liability. Scene control. Luke pointed at the jam of vehicles and the floodwater pouring across the only marked route. Control what? Gridlock? No answer. Just wind. He took the drainage cut to the right, a narrow strip between guardrail and tree line that most drivers never noticed because it wasn't meant for them. Mud swallowed half the front wheel and tried to torque the handlebars sideways. He stood on pegs, throttled steady, felt the bike hunt, and then bite. Behind him, engines rose and fell like a rough choir. They disappeared into service trails the county maps treated as afterthoughts. The closer they got to the quarry access, the worse the storm sounded. Less rain, more impact. Limbs snapping, sheet metal somewhere slamming repeatedly, sirens muffled by terrain and water, far enough away to be useless. At the police perimeter, yellow tape flapped from two bent posts and did nothing to hold back fear. A lieutenant in a soaked tan uniform stood under a failing pop-up canopy, trying to run 3 radios at once. His eyes landed on the lanterns and narrowed. "Absolutely not," he shouted as Luke killed the engine. "You are not certified for technical rescue. I am not adding civilians to this incident." From below the embankment came a long, weak bus horn, one note dragged thin by water and battery strain. Everyone on the ridge heard it. For 1 second, no one moved. Luke walked toward the lieutenant until they were close enough to skip the shouting. Rain streamed off his brow and into his beard. "Who can get down there now?" "We have units en route." "From where?" "State line." "How long?" The lieutenant looked away first. Another horn cry floated up, shorter this time. Luke jabbed a finger toward a laminated county map clipped to the command table. "Paved route's dead. East Bridge is under. Your rescue trucks won't fit the timber cut, even if they make it. We came in on the only passable line. Argue later." The lieutenant's jaw worked. "I got names on your patch list that make judges nervous." Luke didn't blink. "Then write mine first." A younger deputy standing beside them, face pale beneath rain, leaned in. "Sir, bus is on its side, partial in water. Kids are still inside. We need hands." The lieutenant looked downhill, then at the standstill of parent vehicles choking the road, then back at the men and women in mud-streaked cuts already unstrapping gear. He gave the smallest nod Luke had ever seen and said the words like swallowing nails. "Do not make me regret this." Luke turned and barked orders before the man finished exhaling. "Allen, Deacon, chainsaws and limb clear on Path Alpha. Marisol, your triage at contact point. Set dry zone uphill if you can find one. Stitch and Gomez, run line between switchback posts. Anybody with asthma meds, hand them to Marisol now." Helmets came off, gloves tightened, straps tossed shoulder to shoulder. Movement replaced debate. As they started down, Luke caught snippets from dispatch through the lieutenant's speaker. 21 students accounted for en route manifest. 1 driver, female, possibly pinned. Reports of rising water entering rear compartment. 2 juveniles struggling to breathe. Every number landed like added weight. Halfway down the slick embankment, Luke nearly lost footing as mud gave way beneath him. He slammed a hand into a cedar trunk, felt bark tear skin through the glove, kept moving. Below, through trees whipping in the wind, he finally saw the bus. Yellow side turned toward the storm, windows spidered, hazard lights blinking weak and off-rhythm like a tired heartbeat. A boy's hand appeared briefly at a cracked pane, vanished, reappeared. The stakes in Millhaven were never abstract. They had names on baseball rosters and lunch account balances. They lived in trailers with grandparents, in duplexes with blackout curtains from night shifts, in farmhouses where internet died when rain got heavy. If this bus went another 10 feet downslope, it would slide into quarry runoff too deep and fast to stand in. If those kids stayed inside, waiting for equipment that couldn't physically reach them, hypothermia and panic would start making decisions no adult could reverse. Luke heard the lieutenant above him, now on open channel, voice changed from command to urgency. "All units, be advised civilian off-road team engaged in initial access under my authorization. Repeat, authorized." It wasn't praise. It was a line in the sand. Luke reached the shattered side window and looked in. Faces stared back, mud-streaked, crying, trying hard not to cry, old enough to understand danger, and too young to carry it calmly. He put one hand on the frame, leaned in so they could see his eyes and not the storm. "Listen up," he said steady and loud. "My name's Luke. We're getting you out. One at a time, exactly how we say. You do that, everybody goes home." Outside, thunder rolled over the quarry like a collapsing wall. Inside the bus, a girl in a red backpack nodded once and wiped her nose with the heel of her hand. Luke took a breath that tasted like rainwater and rust. Then he climbed in. He dropped through the cracked window frame, boots landing on what had been the driver's side wall and was now the floor. The air inside the bus was hot with breath and fear, sharp with diesel and wet vinyl. Rain stuttered through fractured glass in slanted lines. Backpacks, lunch boxes, and one sneaker floated in a shallow surge that sloshed from rear to front every time the wind shoved the frame. The interior lights were dead, but hazard blink from outside leaked in through broken windows, painting everyone in pulsing orange. "Eyes on me," Luke said again, louder, bracing a hand against an overhead rail that had become a side brace. "Nobody climbs. Nobody pushes. You wait till I touch your shoulder, then you move." A boy near the middle was hyperventilating hard enough to tremble. A girl with braces had both hands over her ears. Another kid clutched an inhaler but stared at it like he'd forgotten what it did. Luke crouched, lowering himself to their level. "What's your name?" he asked the boy with the inhaler. "C. Carter." "Carter, you know how to use that?" A nod too fast to be confidence. "Good. 2 puffs now. Slow in, slow out, like you're cooling soup." He looked around. "Who else has asthma meds?" A hand rose from the back, then another halfway up. The farther one shook violently. "Got you," Luke said. He tapped his shoulder mic. "Marisol, inside contact. I need you at window with respiratory kit now. 2 known asthma, maybe 3. Her voice cracked through static. "On my way. 30 seconds?" A wet groan ran through the bus as the chassis shifted a fraction downhill. Every child felt it. Crying rose in waves. "Hey," Luke barked, not cruel, just sharp enough to cut panic. "That noise is metal. Metal talks. Doesn't mean it's quitting." He scanned quickly. 21 students on manifest, but not all in sight from this angle. Some were wedged near what had become the upper side, clinging to seat backs. One girl held her left arm against her chest, face drained white. "Who's hurt bad?" he asked. Several voices answered at once. Lena's arm. Evan hit his head. "Ms. Barlow can't move." He followed the last voice forward, climbing awkwardly over twisted seat supports. The driver hung in her restraints at an angle no spine should tolerate, hips pinned against a bent steering column. Her forehead was cut and bleeding into one eye. She was conscious, jaw clenched so tight a muscle fluttered in her cheek. "Ms. Barlow," Luke asked. She focused with effort. "Kids first," she said immediately, voice hoarse. "Count them. Don't let—" Pain folded her sentence in half. "Working on it," Luke said. He touched the jammed metal around her hip lightly, reading what was trapped and what was structural. Not now, not without tools and leverage. "You stay with me." Outside, boots thudded through mud. Marisol appeared at the window in a yellow slicker, hair plastered to her face, med bag slung cross-body. "Window chain set," she called. "We can receive." Luke nodded once. "We're sending ambulatory first, then injured, then non-ambulatory. Keep the warm zone moving uphill." He pointed at the girl in the red backpack. "Emily." "You. What's your name?" She swallowed. "Emily." "Good, Emily. You're now my helper. You see anyone trying to stand before I say, you tell them sit. Loud." A flicker of purpose replaced raw fear. "Okay." Do it now. Emily turned, voice cracking but strong enough. Everybody sit. He said sit. It helped. Not perfect, but enough. Luke keyed the mic again. Lieutenant, this is Chambers. I need perimeter cleared top road to 1 lane right now. Parents are blocking our casualty path. The lieutenant came back tight and clipped. Negative, we're trying, but they're... Don't try. Do. Put units bumper to bumper if you have to. I'm handing you children in a weather that'll kill 'em. Silence. Then, copy. 1 lane hard closure, in progress. Luke started the extraction rhythm. Shoulder tap. Name if he had it. Hands here. Feet there. Look at me. He passed each child to the window where Marisol and Stitch received and sent uphill along the rope line Gomez had rigged between cedar trunks. 10 out moved fast enough to feel like momentum. 11 came with screaming. A boy froze halfway through the window, terrified by the drop and wind. Luke had to wedge his own body beneath him to keep him from falling back onto other kids. You don't have to be brave, he said into the child's ear while rain hit both of them. You just have to move now. The boy moved. 12 was Lena, the broken arm. Luke splinted her with 2 ruler-straight pieces of snapped seat trim and an elastic wrap from his kit, then wrapped her in a foil blanket that crackled like fire. She whimpered once and apologized for crying. Don't, Luke said. Crying means breathing. By 13, his bad shoulder was grinding hot and numb from lifting against angles, but he kept the rhythm because rhythm was what held panic together. Outside, Alan's chainsaw snarled to life and then choked, then roared again as he cut a fallen pine off the upper switchback. Deacon shouted for another strap. Somewhere above, a parent broke the perimeter and had to be physically pulled back, shouting a child's name until his voice failed. The bus rocked harder when gusts came broadside. Each shove made the kids flinch and grab whatever they could reach. Water at the rear rose from ankle to calf and carried pencil pouches and wrappers forward in brown eddies. Luke counted heads again. Carter? Here. Emily? Here. Ty? A weak here from under a seat where he'd crawled to hide. Good. Keep answering. He got to 17 before he heard a different sound beneath storm and crying. A metallic pop, low and final, from somewhere under the front axle. He filed it away and kept moving. At the window, Marisol pressed a rescue inhaler spacer into his hand. Kid in the back, wheezing hard. I got 1 dose in. He's still tight. Luke passed it to the smaller boy, curled near the rear panel. Name? J. Jonah. Jonah. Mask over mouth. Slow. He demonstrated once. That's it. Again? Jonah obeyed between panicked gasps. Color returned to shade. Luke looked to Marisol. How many uphill now? 14 at warm zone. 2 more in transit, 1 with possible concussion vomiting. Keep them moving to Lieutenant's med tent. No bunching. She grabbed his forearm before pulling away. Water's climbing fast on the lower side. I see it. She vanished to receive the next child. When Luke turned back, Miss Barlow made a strangled sound as another shudder ran through the frame. Rear hatch? She managed. Dry rear. I will. He climbed toward the back through a narrowing corridor of dangling seatbelts and jammed packs. The emergency hatch sat above him, now sideways relative to gravity, paint flaking around the latch. He grabbed, pulled hard, nothing. He braced both boots, yanked with his whole back. The handle moved half an inch and stopped dead with a rusted crunch. He swore under his breath. He struck the panel with his fist, then looked for the red safety hammer mounts by the rear windows. Empty brackets, 4 of them, no hammers. For 1 beat, he just stared, rain drilling through broken glass onto his neck. Who took your hammers? He said to no one, to everyone. A girl nearby whispered, "They were gone since winter." Luke closed his eyes once, opened them, and keyed his mic. "Lieutenant, rear hatch, Einop. Repeating. Emergency rear hatch seized. Hammer mounts empty. We have no secondary egress from back section." The reply came a second later, disbelieving. "Say again?" "You heard me." Outside, the lieutenant cursed loudly enough to clip transmission. Luke crawled forward again, anger cold and clean now, not distracting, fuel. He had 4 kids left inside, plus the driver pinned. Wind screamed across the exposed side and made the bus shell hum. Above them, thunder cracked close enough to flash white through the windows. "Everybody's still in here," Luke called. "Eyes on me." 4 faces turned. Jonah with the spacer still clutched, Ty shaking, a tall girl bleeding from her scalp, and one silent boy hugging a trumpet case as if it were life support. "We're next," Luke said. "All of us." The complications came in layers, each one small enough to manage if it arrived alone, lethal when stacked. As Luke guided Jonah toward the window, the lower embankment gave way with a wet slurp, and the bus dropped 2 inches. Screams detonated inside and out. Jonah ripped free and clawed at a seat frame, breathing fast again. "Stay with me," Luke shouted, catching him before his head hit steel. Outside, Gomez yelled, "Line 1 just lost tension." Through the window, Luke saw why. One of the cedar posts anchoring their hand line had uprooted in the saturated soil, dragging rope and 3 people sideways before Deacon threw his weight onto it. A rider went to one knee in rushing water and barely kept hold of the child clipped to his chest harness. "Reset anchor to bike frame," Luke yelled. "Use Alan's rear crash bar. Double wrap." Alan didn't argue. He spun his adventure bike broadside into the mud, killed the engine, and fed webbing through the trellis frame while rain hammered his helmet. Another lantern mirrored him 20 feet uphill, turning 2 motorcycles into improvised bollards. The lieutenant's voice broke over channel, strained by competing calls. "Chambers, we've got an incoming medic unit at Top Road in 10. 10 is too long," Luke snapped. "I need your deputies on lower line now, not traffic duty." A pause, then the younger deputy answered instead of the lieutenant. "Copy. Ruiz and Keller moving down." Progress, Luke thought grimly. He got Jonah to the window with Marisol's help and handed him through. Ty followed, sobbing but moving. The scalp-wound girl went next after Luke wrapped her head with gauze and duct tape, when tape would have been enough, but kindness was part of medicine too. That left the silent trumpet boy and Miss Barlow. "Name?" Luke asked the boy. "Micah." "You can bring it," Luke said, nodding at the case. "But you use both hands to climb when I say." Micah hesitated, then set the case down. Good choice. Before Luke could lift him, a branch the size of a telephone pole slammed into the bus roof with a deafening boom. The shell buckled inward above the rear seats, showering rust flakes and safety glass. Micah screamed and ducked. Luke covered him with his body until the vibration stopped. Outside, Alan shouted that Path Alpha was blocked again. Deacon answered that he and Stitch were cutting a new diagonal through brush, but it was steeper and slicker. "Do it," Luke said into the mic. "Mark with chem lights if you got 'em. We can't lose route in this rain." "Copy." Micah made it out on the second try, leaving the trumpet case behind. Luke made a note of where it wedged against the wheel well, because kids remembered what they lost on days like this. Then there were 2 souls left in the bus, Luke and Miss Barlow. He slid back toward the driver's compartment. Water now lapped at his boots, even up front, pushed there by surge from the crushed rear quarter. Miss Barlow's breathing had gone shallow and fast, shock setting in under adrenaline. Look at me, Luke said. How bad on a scale of 1 to 10? She gave a pained laugh that was mostly a hiss. Marine question? Answer it. 9 when it moves. Okay. We're gonna make it not move. He examined the entrapment again. Bent steering column, pinning her right hip, seat mount twisted, lap belt buckle jammed. If he forced wrong, he could shear metal deeper into her pelvis. He needed spreaders he didn't have, or time he didn't have. Lieutenant, he called. Driver's pinned hard, likely pelvic. Need extraction tools. The lieutenant came back. Fire's still 15 out. Roads. I know the roads. Another deep vibration rolled through the chassis. Not wind this time. Something under load shifting. Luke looked out the windshield, or what was left of it. Downslope. Mudsheet water was cutting a new channel directly beneath the front corner. The bus's front axle sat half over a growing void where the embankment had been 10 minutes earlier. He felt the math of it click into place in his bones. If that edge failed, the bus would roll. He climbed to the side window and shouted for Marisol. She splashed over, face gray with rain and strain. How many clear? 21 kids confirmed at upper triage, she shouted back. 1 maybe fractured ulna, 1 concussion, 2 asthma improving. We got names against manifest. All kids out. Relief hit and passed instantly. Driver still pinned, he said, and this thing's not stable. As if to confirm him, a gust hit broadside and the entire bus tilted another inch toward the washout with a sick, drawn-out groan. Marisol's eyes widened. Luke, I know. Up on the ridge, the lieutenant was still trying to run command through collapsing plans. Parents pushed tape. Deputies pushed back. Radios screamed updates no one could act on fast enough. The system was catching up to failure in real time. Luke keyed channel hard enough, his thumb hurt. Lieutenant, get down here, now. This time he came. He slid halfway down with Ruiz and Keller at his heels, almost ate mud, caught himself on a sapling, and reached the window, breathing hard. His rain jacket was gone. He looked less like command and more like any other soaked man in a bad place. What? Luke pointed through the windshield gap. Front axle's hanging over a washout, another hard gust, and she rolls into that pit. The lieutenant squinted through rain, saw it, and went very still. We hold for fire? He asked, but it wasn't a real question anymore. Hold and she dies, Luke said. Maybe we do too. The lieutenant swallowed, glanced back uphill where his official plan ended in blocked roads and delayed units. When he looked back, his face had changed, not softer, just stripped of pretense. Tell me what you need. Luke answered without hesitation because hesitation was what killed people when infrastructure already had. 3 bikes as anchors, heavy ones, he said. 1 upslope on each side of this window, 1 farther back as failsafe. I want braided toe straps from frame to frame, then a live hand line from window to high ground. Deacon and Allen can rig it. The lieutenant turned and bellowed, voice carrying like a siren. You heard him. Move. No one asked who him was. Riders and deputies surged at once. Allen and Gomez muscled bikes into position until rear tires dug trenches in mud. Deacon fed yellow toe straps under crash bars and around trunks, cinching with practiced hands. Ruiz helped knot what he didn't understand exactly, learned as he pulled. Keller waded chest-deep into runoff to set the lower line and nearly vanished when current punched his legs. Stitch grabbed his collar and hauled him upright. Keep feet wide, Stitch yelled. Don't fight straight on, angle it. Luke climbed halfway out the window, coordinating over storm noise. Double those knots. Not that branch, it's deadwood. Marisol, station 2 at each relay point. No single person holds. The lieutenant picked up his radio, no longer competing with Luke, amplifying him. Command to all units on scene. Follow Chambers' instructions. Repeat, so follow Chambers' instructions. Deputies to lower corridor immediately. Parent perimeter holds unless assigned medical transport. The words spread outward, transforming chaos into lanes. Children, wrapped in blankets, were shepherded uphill through rain by riders who looked like silhouettes in smoke. Parents cried into those blankets and clung and thanked and tried to surge back downslope, only to be redirected by deputies now working in sync with the lanterns instead of against them. At the bus window, Luke tied one strap around his own forearm, tested tension, then clipped a spare carabiner to the inner seat frame beside Miss Barlow. Plan changed, he told her. No waiting for extraction unit. We're doing immediate pull on my mark. She blinked through blood and rain. You got enough people? He glanced out at the line forming in the water. Bikers, deputies, one volunteer firefighter who had arrived on foot, all spaced arm to arm, braced against the current. Now we do. Another gust slammed the bus, and the anchors groaned but held. Luke took one breath, then shouted to the corridor, to the lieutenant with the radio, to everyone caught in the storm's mouth with him. Full evacuation. Set the chain. Hands locked onto straps. Boots dug into mud. Voices answered down the line, one after another, until the command echoed up the hill like a pledge. Chain set. 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 The storm kept raging. But for the first time since the call came in, they had a plan faster than the water. Pull team ready, Luke shouted. Down the improvised corridor, voices answered through rain and engine tick and the rattle of loose sheet metal. Ready! Ready! He climbed back inside to Ms. Barlow, knife between his teeth, and saw at once she was fading. Her pupils tracked him, but slower now. Blood and rain made pink rivulets down the canted dash. I need you with me, he said, cutting the jammed shoulder belt webbing where it disappeared behind twisted seat frame. On 3. We shift your weight left. Don't fight me. She gave the smallest nod. Luke looped a tow strap under the bent steering column and fed the bitter end out the window. Alan took it, ran it to the nearest bike frame, and rapped twice like Luke had shown him in the shop lot 100 storms ago. Take tension, Luke called. The strap went taut with a low singing whine. Metal answered from somewhere deep in the bus body, a groan that sounded almost alive. More. Outside boots dug in. 4 men leaned back on the line, rain sheeting off their jackets. The steering column moved half an inch. Miss Barlow screamed. Hold, Luke barked. Everything froze except the weather. He crouched beside her, one hand braced behind her neck so she didn't slam into steel when the shell shuddered. I know. We're not done. Above them, lightning cracked so close the flash turned the bus interior bone white for a heartbeat. Thunder hit instantly, not as sound but as impact, a concussive slap that shook mud from the embankment and sent another gush of brown water through the broken rear windows. The antagonist was not a man, it was accumulation. Deferred maintenance, cut routes, old roads, failed radios. Weather made meaner every year. It kept finding new angles of attack. Keller's voice tore up from the lower line. Current's up. It's up by my chest. Rotate him out, the lieutenant shouted. Ruiz, take his position. Luke keyed his mic. No rotation until we free driver. If line collapses now, this bus rolls. The lieutenant hesitated, then relayed exactly that, his voice flattening into command. They tried again. Tension, grind, shift. The column came another inch before stopping dead against a crease in the bulkhead. Miss Barlow bit through a cry and started shaking uncontrollably. Not enough, Luke muttered. He looked at the strap angle. Wrong leverage, too shallow. He crawled halfway out the window to reset, boots sliding on slick vinyl. Deacon met him with a second strap and eyes narrowed against rain. "Bike anchors sinking," Deacon said. "Rear tires down to axle. Then chalk it with rock and your body if you have to." Deacon nodded once and vanished. Luke had just fed the new strap through a lower dash brace when the upper slope above the bus let go in a heavy, wet sheet. Mud and fist-sized stones rushed past the side windows, hammering the shell. One rock punched through what was left of the windshield and clipped Luke's forearm, reopening the old cut and the fresh stitches in one brutal scrape. Hot blood mixed instantly with cold rain. He barely noticed until Marisol at the window grabbed his sleeve. "You're bleeding through?" "Later." "Luke, later." He turned back to Miss Barlow, and that was when she caught his wrist with surprising strength. "Two more," she rasped. He leaned in. "What?" "2 kids." She coughed, swallowed pain. "Not on my sheet. I picked up from Pine Loop when Bus 14 no-showed. Siblings, back seats. Her eyes rolled with another surge of pain. "I thought they got out." For a second, the storm seemed to drop away. Luke heard only the pulse in his damaged arm. "How old?" "6th grade girl, 8th grade boy, Maddie and Luis Ortega." Outside, someone shouted, but Luke was already moving, climbing over tilted seatbacks toward the rear where black water sloshed and debris pinned pockets of space. "Maddie!" he yelled. "Luis!" No answer, only rain drumming through broken glass. He kicked aside floating backpacks, one by one. Found a trapped lunch cooler, a bent trumpet case, no kids. "Maddie! Luis!" A weak knock answered from behind the collapsed rear bench. 3 taps, then 2, like someone had learned to conserve sound. "Got them!" Luke shouted. "Rear compartment!" The words hit the outside line like a shockwave. The lieutenant grabbed his radio. "Upper triage, confirm Ortega siblings. Status, now." Static ate half the response. Then faint. "Negative on Ortega tags. We don't have them." Everything Luke's team had built, order, rhythm, confidence, wobbled on that single correction. If he'd pulled Ms. Barlow first and called clear, 2 children would have gone down with the bus into Quarry runoff, and no one would have known until dawn. Getting to them was worse than finding them. The rear corner had folded inward from the rollover and the branch strike, creating a jagged pocket the size of a closet. Luke squeezed in shoulder first, water up to his thighs now, and found Luis braced over his sister like a shield. He had a gash at his hairline and a stare too flat for his age. Maddie's lips were blue at the edges. Her right leg was trapped beneath twisted seat track. "You did good," Luke said, voice deliberately calm. "You kept her warm." Luis shook his head once. "I couldn't get her out." "You did exactly right." He keyed Mike. "Marisol, 2 additional pediatrics, located rear entrapment, hypothermia risk high. Need pediatric wraps at window now." Her voice came back thin with guilt and urgency. "On you. 30 seconds. 30 became 90. Then 2 minutes. Because at that exact moment, their anchor system failed. Outside, Alan shouted, a raw, involuntary sound, and then came the noise no one wanted, a motorcycle tipping and sliding. One of the uphill anchor bikes, sunk too deep in saturated mud, tore free under load and slewed sideways 10 feet before catching on a stump. The handline snapped taut, then slack, then taut again, whipping one deputy off his feet. Keller went under in the runoff channel up to his shoulders. Stitch and Ruiz dragged him out by vest straps, but he came up screaming, left leg bent wrong below the knee. "We lost Keller," Ruiz yelled. "Leg's broken." The lieutenant was suddenly triaging his own people while trying to keep parents from storming the slope and maintain a rescue corridor with one less body and one less anchor. This one they could not fix in the same breath. Keller had to go up now, and with him went manpower they didn't have. The failed bike had to be reset, but every reset cost minutes, and minutes were now measured against water rise and structural creep. Luke felt the bus move under him, not inches this time, but a slow, settling roll as the front edge of embankment continued to wash away. He got his knife under the seat track, pinning Maddie's leg, and tried to pry. No movement. "Luis," he said, "I'm going to need your help. When I say push, you push this bar away from your sister with both hands." Luis stared at the bar, then at Luke, then nodded. "Push." They strained together. Metal gave a fraction. Enough for Luke to yank Maddie's boot free, then her leg, then all of her into his arms. She was frighteningly light. He passed her toward the aisle where Marisol finally reached him through the dark with a thermal wrap and oxygen mask. Her eyes met his for 1 second. Storm, fear, something like apology. "Take her," he said. Marisol took Maddie and disappeared toward the window chain. Luke turned back for Luis just as the bus shifted again with a deep, rolling thud. The rear pocket narrowed. Seat frame pinned Luke's bad shoulder hard enough to spark white pain down his arm. For the first time all night, doubt hit him clean. Not tactical doubt, existential. He was 46 with old injuries, reopened stitches, and a bus trying to become a coffin around him. He was asking bodies held together by stubbornness and duct tape to outperform weather and neglect and probability. He had led these people here. If he misjudged once, they would carry that forever. "Luke!" Marisol shouted from the aisle. "Move!" He sucked in a breath, shoved through pain, and pulled Luis free by his jacket collar as the trapped seat finally peeled loose with a shriek. They reached the window chain in a blur of hands. Luis went out first, then Maddie, then Marisol. Luke stayed, one hand on the frame, forcing himself not to rush his breathing. He looked uphill through rain and saw Keller being carried in a tarp sling, jaw clenched, white as paper. Real cost, not theoretical. He pressed his forehead once against cold metal and whispered, "Not done." Then he crawled back to Miss Barlow. Up at the warm zone, Marisol nearly dropped Maddie, not because she was weak, but because the child's skin had that waxy chill she remembered too well from another rain-soaked roadside years ago. Another kid wrapped in foil while adults pretended calm around him. She knelt in mud, got the mask seated, checked pulse at the neck, counted beats with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. 34 seconds, regroup, airway open, warmth, reassess. She used to do this in uniform with county patches on her sleeves, before the budget cuts, before dispatch software changes that rerouted crews like parcels, before the night, a flooded underpass, and a locked gate added 12 minutes to a call for a little boy in status asthmaticus, and she had held him while he stopped fighting for breath. Not her son, not family, but small enough that his sneakers fit in one hand. She had quit 3 weeks later and told everyone it was her knees. The lie held because it was easier than saying she couldn't keep burying strangers while county commissioners argued line items. Now she looked down and realized she had done it again in miniature. Declared a count complete too early because she wanted one thing, one goddamn thing, to be over and true. 21 confirmed. I said it on radio. She had said it with confidence. Luke had acted on it. If Ms. Barlow hadn't spoken. Marisol swallowed hard and looked away so no one saw her eyes fill. Around her, parents crowded the tape line. Emily's mother held her daughter and sobbed into wet hair. Carter took careful puffs from a spacer while a deputy timed him with a watch. Luis sat on a stretcher, staring at his scraped hands, saying nothing. Marisol stood and walked 3 steps into the trees before her knees gave. She braced against a pine trunk and finally let herself break for 10 seconds. Only 10. Rain hiding the tears she refused to wipe. She was not steady. She was trained and frayed and furious at herself. And underneath all of it was Luke. Luke with scarred neck and impossible calm. Luke who never asked people to do what he wouldn't do first. Luke who had once stood in her kitchen at 2 a.m. after a storm run, dripping on her floor while she stitched his eyebrow, and looked at her like maybe both of them deserved a life that didn't involve triage tags. She had laughed it off, said she was too old for complicated. Truth was simpler and uglier. She was terrified of loving someone who ran toward collapse for a living. Tonight he had run in again, bleeding, and she had almost helped kill 2 kids with a bad count. Ruiz found her there, breathless. Marisol, we need you back down. Driver still pinned. She nodded without speaking. As she moved, she keyed her mic on private and said into static, low enough only Luke would hear if signal held. I was wrong on that count. That's on me. A beat, then his voice rough and immediate. Not now. I need you to hear. Not now, he repeated, softer this time. You stay in the fight. She closed her eyes once, then opened them and stepped back into the rain. By the time Marisol returned to the bus window, the situation had degraded from dangerous to critical. The second anchor bike was now half submerged at the lower edge, its rear wheels spinning uselessly in current every time someone bumped the throttle to reset tension. Alan had a rope around his own waist, tied to a stump, working knee-deep beside it, like a dock worker in a hurricane. Deacon's left hand was bleeding through a glove from a strap burn that had carved skin to raw meat. The lieutenant had lost his hat, his voice, and any remaining illusion. This was a controlled scene. Fire unit is 5 out, he shouted, as if distance still mattered. Luke's answer came from inside the bus. We don't have 5. Then the antagonist made its final move, upstream, unseen in the dark. The quarry runoff culvert, plugged fully with debris, and then blew free in one violent surge. A wall of brown water punched down the channel, rising nearly a foot in seconds around everyone on the lower line. The current slammed Keller's abandoned position, tore loose a secondary rope, and drove debris, branches, fence wire, a plastic barrel, straight into the bus's exposed undercarriage. The shell lurched. Not a warning groan this time. Motion. Back! Back! Someone screamed. But Luke was still inside with Miss Barlow. Marisol lunged to the window, reached in, and felt him through the dark. He shoved a clipped strap into her hands. Driver, first pass won't clear, he shouted over the roar. Column's got her. I need cutters or a blade saw now. We don't have either. Then bolt cutters from my roll bag. Red handle. If not, my knife. Another shudder. The front of the bus dipped a visible inch toward the void. The lieutenant stumbled down to the window, grabbed the frame, and looked in. Fear stripped him honest. Chambers, we pull you out now. That's an order. Luke didn't even look up. You can court-martial me later. A runner splashed from uphill with the red-handled cutters. Marisol jammed them through the window to Luke. He took them and vanished forward toward the driver compartment. Line teams, the lieutenant roared, voice cracking. Prepare emergency haul on my count. No one asked haul what. Bus, man, driver, all of it together if needed. Inside, metal shrieked. Once, twice. Then, through the storm, a child's voice floated, from somewhere no one expected. From deep in the bus rear, thin and terrified. Mr. Chambers? Marisol went cold. She looked at the lieutenant. He looked back, disbelieving. A second voice, younger, crying, Please don't leave us. Luke's head snapped up from the driver compartment, rain and blood running down his face, as understanding hit all at once. 2 children he had just pulled had been the Ortegas from Pine Loop. But there were still 2 more trapped in a void behind the collapsed rear panel, unheard in the surge and chaos. The bus rolled another fraction toward the runoff pit. 1 anchor bike tipped onto its side. Straps snapped tight enough to sing. Outside, half the team shouted for retreat. Inside, Luke turned toward the rear darkness instead, and the slope began to move.